back on TV tomorrow at noon Eastern. And now here's Harris.
Okay, let's keep this going. Fox News alert President Trump on Capitol Hill. We watched it play out. He was rallying Republican senators on his tax plan, their version that they're about to pass now, they say, a big ticket item on his end-of-year agenda. As the top Democrats in Congress back out of a critical White House meeting. This is Outnumbered Overtime. I'm Harris Faulkner. The president made his second trip to the Hill to sell tax reform today. This time to Senate Republican caucus, at least two of his fellow Republicans are no's at the moment. Senator Steve Daines of Montana became the second GOP senator to oppose the bill, joining Wisconsin's Ron Johnson, both calling for the plan to do more to help small businesses. Republicans can only lose 2 votes. While he remains optimistic a deal can be reached, Senator Daines says this is why he's a no.
I've had very constructive and positive conversations with President Trump, with Vice President Pence, with Secretary Mnuchin, with Gary Cohn. These are constructive conversations looking at how we can solve some of these challenges we face right now to get our Main Street businesses growing. And if we do that, we create more jobs and higher wages.
All right, so he says he's a no, but maybe he can get someplace else. We'll see. All this as Democratic leaders Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi abruptly pulled out of a meeting with the president on funding the government. After President Trump took a shot at them on Twitter, Chief Congressional Correspondent Mike Emanuel. So the president said no deal, and Chuck Schumer was just, wow, it's still happening behind you. There's a lot going on, Mike.
No question about it, Harris. We've got dueling major stories here on Capitol Hill this hour. You got the president inside the Senate GOP luncheon to make his pitch for tax reform. Then you've got that other Big Four meeting that was scheduled for later this afternoon at the White House. The president tweeted about it, saying he did not see a deal coming. So then the top Democrats said they would not go to the White House. And Senate Democratic leader Chuck Schumer talked about it on the Senate floor.
Given that the president doesn't see a deal between Democrats and the White House, Leader Pelosi and I believe the best path forward is to continue negotiating with our Republican counterparts in Congress instead.
The other huge issue, of course, is the intense pressure to get 50 Republican senators to vote yes on tax reform. Those behind the effort think eventually they'll get there, but the president wants to deliver by Christmas. He's making that pitch right now behind closed doors. And the Republican leader who's in charge of counting votes says he's hopeful they will get there.
Unlike the debate and votes we had on health care, every single member of the Republican conference is working to get to yes. And as long as people are willing to work in good faith and we'll come up with alternative solutions to try to address their concerns, I think we will have a great victory at the end of this week.
There are some Republican skeptics for a variety of reasons. Some think the business proposals favor corporations over small businesses. Others are worried about the debt. And here's one of those members on that front.
I've been a deficit hawk for 11 years. What I don't want to do is lose my integrity and actually help hurt our nation and our children when we have $20 trillion in debt. I don't want on the way out the door support something that I know is going to damage our nation.
There's also been a question about whether some Senate Democrats may get behind tax reform at some point. Some moderate Democrats talked about it earlier and said they really have not been consulted.
We've talked to representatives from the White House on taxes, but that's as far as they have gone. They haven't been incorporated into anything that we're seeing so far. We all want to do tax reform. We all believe it needs to be done.
As we've seen on a variety of issues here on Capitol Hill, the two parties have very different ideas. We will see if they can get 50 Republicans to vote yes on tax reform as soon as later this week. Harris?
Well, I know as that meeting wrapped up with the president, because Chuck Schumer had spoken just moments before as the president was arriving, that you had so many people, and you see the scrum of media behind you, so many people asking questions about what it will mean if 2 Democrats don't show up with 2 Republicans in leadership with the president at the White House today. We will wait to find out. Meanwhile, though, still talking taxes. You talked about those dueling stories, Mike. You set us up. Thank you. For more on this, let's bring in Tony Sayegh, Assistant Secretary for Public Affairs for the Treasury Department, part of President Trump's administration. Great to see you, Tony. Let's talk about the politics of holding out. Who would have guessed that we would have seen today a situation where the leadership on the left side has decided that it will not take a meeting with the sitting president?
Well, Harris, first of all, great to be with you, and congratulations on the success of your show.
Thank you.
I always enjoy watching you. You know, it's really unfortunate. You saw the president back in September invite members from both sides to sit down to deal with a big issue, the debt ceiling and the budget. And he compromised, and he worked out a deal, and they moved forward. And now we're at a very similar point again. And because I think he's been so open-minded, Democrats should be willing to come and make their case to him on why they think the things they're going to put forward are important for him to consider. So the fact that they've stepped aside and out of the invitation the president offered them to be part of this process, I think is unfortunate.
Well, it's so interesting because I remember back on the campaign trail when Hillary Clinton would accuse the president of being baited by a tweet. The president put out his thoughts. Hey, glad to meet with Chuck and Nancy. We assume he meant Schumer and Pelosi, respectively. We know he did. And then at the very end, he listed the reasons why they might have some difficulties making a deal. That's putting out some information. I mean, who's being baited by a tweet here? They're not going to a big meeting at the White House.
And it's their burden then to come and make their arguments, right? Not just step aside and step themselves out of the conversation. So, look, Harris, we're focused on tax reform right now. We are feeling extremely well positioned. The president's been reaching out since day one to both sides of the aisle, frankly. We've hosted several meetings here in bipartisan nature at the White House with congressional leadership from both the House and the Senate, from rank and file members. So we really understand that the country knows we need to get tax reform done for the first time in 30 years so we can grow the economy. By growing the economy, you expand the opportunity for more Americans to benefit from what we have going on. For 11 years, we've had profits growing for corporations, but we've not had wages rising for workers. That's because we have a backward business tax system. That gets fixed with tax reform. Middle-income families are going to see drastic rate reductions in their taxes. They're going to see the doubling of the standard deduction, where the first $24,000 of a family's income is tax-free. Simpler taxes, so you don't have to get assistance to file them. There is so much we're trying to do to help middle-income, hard-working families, small businesses who will enjoy the lowest rates in 80 years, and big companies and small companies who create jobs and grow the economy.
You know, Tony, there are a couple things I want to get to. One has to do with the debt. And you hear certain senators calling themselves deficit hawks. And I wonder, though, where you put that portion of the argument when you add $1.5 trillion to the debt, the GOP, the party of small government. And you say what?
Look, we're very sensitive to the debt. It doubled in the last 8 years of President Obama. And the large reason we've not been able to really fix it is because we've had anemic economic growth of 1.9%. In the first 2 quarters of President Trump's administration, we've had over 3% growth on the promise of tax reform and some of the things we're doing on the economic side. That's how you resolve the debt. You grow the economy. And 9 of the country's top economists came out yesterday in the Wall Street Journal in a letter to Secretary Mnuchin where they prove what we've been saying all along, that you have substantial economic growth with tax reform that does narrow that $1.5 trillion number, and where we are going to see significant economic growth and not be adding to the deficit. In fact, changing the conversation completely, because then we'll be able to pay down the debt once you actually get an economy growing again.
All right, last question for you. I am curious to know at this point about making the deal. You've got the Art of the Deal author there, has gone to Capitol Hill to talk tax reform with senators. And you know that he'll be talking about a deal later this afternoon, whether the Democrats show up or not, for the spending bill and immigration conversation that's going to go on at the White House. But with regard to this, how do you win over those 6 wild cards? People like Lisa Murkowski, and I don't know if we've got that picture to pop up on the screen. Wow, Capitol Hill cleared out quickly, didn't it? The minute the senators all walked away, everybody went, what? We're still watching this live scene because we do know that they will be doing some wheeling and dealing on Capitol Hill after the president has left today, so we'll watch this for news as well. But what do you do to pull over Ron Johnson? Maybe a little bit different. Maybe there's some others that are a little bit different. Lisa Murkowski, Susan Collins. We don't know what John McCain is going to do. What do you put out there to win them over?
We're very hopeful, to be honest, Harris. You know, we've had great conversations with all the senators you mentioned. Senator Murkowski's coming out very recently indicating her support, potential support for tax reform. Rand Paul,
she had
who had
some
a lot
stuff
of concerns.
she wants.
who had a lot of concerns with health care, has come out yesterday and said he supports tax reform. We understand what Senator Johnson and Senator Daines are concerned about. We agree. We'd like to try to increase benefits, of course, to all businesses so they could create jobs and grow the economy. So this is all part of the conversation, the process moving forward. But there's complete unification in wanting to get tax reform done among all the Republicans in the Senate.
Tony Sayegh, we appreciate your time, sir. Thank you very much.
Great to be with you, Harris. Thank you.
Well, for more on this, let's bring in Fox News politics editor and halftime report editor Chris Direwalt. I kind of feel like it's halftime. Right? There was a lot going on Capitol Hill. Those senators, walked away and everybody went, okay, next.
My friend, I picked a good day to be out of Washington. It's crazy down there.
So talk to me, though. I do want to kind of revisit this idea of one thing having to do with the other.
Okay.
So when you have Democrats who throw down the gauntlet, and,
right.
those are my words for what Chuck Schumer did, because
that's fair.
He was speaking at a time, and I understand it was his open time to speak,
right.
But it coincided with the president waiting for senators to leave that Senate floor and join a meeting with him.
Right.
You've got an opportunity to meet the president later, and if only to give him, as you and I say from the South, a piece of your mind. It doesn't happen now, potentially. They say they're not going to do this.
You
think they'll show up?
No, this is theatrical.
Okay.
So we have to remember the larger context. We have to pull back the lens here a little bit and look at what we're really talking about. What we're really talking about is that this summer, when Donald Trump threw Mitch McConnell and Paul Ryan under the bus pretty bigly and did a deal with Schumer and Pelosi to get this stuff moved on. They talked about DACA at the time, but it was really about spending and it was really about the debt ceiling. And they said, let's just roll this to the end of the year. And McConnell and Ryan walked out of the meeting and said, what happened? And what happened was Trump said, I'm not going to die on this hill. I'm going to cut a deal with these two Democrats. You're going to go along with it. So going into this one, Trump is trying to rev up the Republicans. He's trying to say, hey, we're all on a team here. We're all Republicans. So he starts out the day and smacks around Schumer and Pelosi with a tweet. Basically, you stink, and I don't think we're going to get a deal because you want to raise taxes. Well, they're not proposing a tax increase or anything. So he does a little stagecraft to rev up the Republicans ahead of to erase from their minds.
Would you have guessed Democrats would have canceled?
What's that?
Would you have guessed that they would have canceled on the president? I mean, you got what you wanted last time, Democrats. Why wouldn't you go back and make your case? Look, the only reason I ask that is because you might have a situation. We were talking about this on Outnumbered with Josh Holmes, who used to work for Mitch McConnell.
Truth.
You have a situation where maybe now guys like Ron Johnson and those 6 wild cards.
They are wildcats, too, as well.
I've been in Arizona for a few days on vacation. So maybe they say, you know what? If the Democrats are going to play like that, let's look harder for ways to compromise, and let's all say yes on this deal. This could really backfire on Democrats.
We are not far from the Great White Way of Broadway here in New York City. This is stagecraft, too, in Washington. So I wouldn't be too worried about that stuff because this is... People are playing for effect, and they have constituencies beyond just getting the deal. What the Democrats know is they have the Republicans right where they want them on a couple of issues. On the question about the DACA, the Dreamers, they've got funding for the end of the year. They got raised the debt ceiling. The Republicans want to talk about tax changes to the tax code. The Democrats say, oh, wait, before you get there, we want to talk to you about this stuff, this must-pass stuff at the end of the year, including Obamacare.
DACA has been explosively dangerous for the Democrats. You saw Nancy Pelosi recently get bum-rushed off the dais where she was standing behind the microphone talking about this to some Dreamers who in the audience said, no way, you don't have our backs on this.
Right.
That's the one thing. And then you've got, really, you want to shut down the government, Democrats? I mean, that's not going to bode well in 2018 either.
Well, as the Republicans proved in 2013, government shutdown doesn't necessarily, if your base thinks it was a good one, it doesn't necessarily mean bad things in the midterms. Trump started out, said, maybe we need a good government shutdown to get things in order around here. Maybe I want a government shutdown. He said when we went in the last round of negotiations, he decided that's not what he wanted then. We'll see both sides, I promise you. We will see both sides play this out till the end. The clock will run down on all this stuff. We will do the shutdown clocks will be started. We'll do all of that stuff because that's how you do this.
Wow. Broadway.
Broadway.
They have one in D.C. apparently as well.
They're right by the Ohio clock.
Thanks for playing and starring in the role of Outnumbered over time for a little while. We
yes,
appreciate it.
My pleasure.
The watchdog claims he was being watched and hounded. We hear from an ex-inspector general about the immense pressure he says he faced from Clinton allies during the Hillary email investigation. And another female staffer with new allegations against Democratic Congressman John Conyers. We speak with one representative who says Congress ought to take mandatory harassment training. Would lawmakers really force that upon themselves, though? And would it change the workplace culture on Capitol Hill? Woo! Busy Tuesday. Stay tuned.
The House Ethics Committee has never been known for taking a tough stance for unethical conduct by any member of Congress. It's often just a black hole where allegations go to die and we never hear about them again.
Fox News alert, a second former staffer has come forward with allegations against Democratic Congressman John Conyers. Deanna Maurer, who was Conyers' deputy chief of staff from 1997 to 2005, told the Detroit News Conyers made unwanted advances at her 3 times, including inappropriate touching and asking her to share a hotel room. But Conyers' attorney in the report is questioning why Maurer would continue to work in Congress after the alleged incidents. Maurer says her need to work caused her to stay, and that no one would have taken her complaint seriously at the time. Joining us now is Virginia Congresswoman Barbara Comstock, who is co-sponsoring a bill to require mandatory anti-harassment and anti-discrimination training for all lawmakers and staffers. Great to see you today. Thank you very much for being with us. I want to start with, first of all, the unraveling of what we're seeing inside the House right now with Conyers, and your take on what we are experiencing. I talked with one staffer yesterday, former staffer with a complaint. Now we have a second one today.
Yes, well, like in other industries and other revelations, when you see patterns and practices and a number of women come forward and tell their stories, I think it becomes apparent, the type of predatory behavior that people engage in, whether it's a Harvey Weinstein or we know, Roger Ailes, Mark Halperin at ABC, and now we're having this situation here. I said on Sunday that I agree with my colleague Kathleen Rice that he should step aside, that these are serious, not just serious allegations, they ring true. And I think the money paid out from his own fund, because he didn't even go through the system, that's a problem. But that's why we're trying to reform the system. The bill, my bill tomorrow that we're voting on, would mandate training, but it is just going to be the first step. We are going to change the system so that women can come forward and make it easier for them to report, have an advocate or a counsel or some type of ombudsman for them, so the system is fair to them to report. And no more secret settlements, no more payments of any taxpayer dollars.
Non-disclosure agreements.
Right,
I mean, beyond
exactly.
just that. I mean, you are
Exactly.
you're gag ordering people, basically, if you will,
Yeah, no,
in a
and
civilian sense.
I agree. And I think what we should do is I think we should either give immunity or somehow we can subpoena these women who made the settlements in the past, allow them to come forward and to tell their stories with no kind of punishment for them, because those non-disclosure agreements, they need to go too. I agree.
You bring up a good point that we haven't talked about, and that is the fact that there could be some penalty. Look, some of these women are breaking their non-disclosures to talk. I mean, otherwise we wouldn't know about the stories in some of the cases. Congresswoman Comstock, you also touched on something else. So just real quickly, yes or no, your bill tomorrow, do you anticipate bipartisan support?
We do. Congresswoman Jackie Speer has co-sponsored it, as well as the chairman and the ranking member of the House Administration Committee, 2 men, are also sponsoring it. So it's important that it not only be something that the women are putting forward, that we have strong support from the men, and that has been our experience. But it's important to emphasize this is just the first step. We are having additional hearings, and we are trying to, as quickly as we can, change this culture and change the rules so that you aren't going to have any more of this kind of secrecy here, and that's why we've moved on this so quickly. But we want to get it right, because 20 years ago when they put these rules in place, I think a lot of people didn't understand that this really wasn't going to help women come forward, and we certainly don't want to be paying for any of these men, and it's mostly men, we think. We haven't heard about any women who've done any of these
Point taken. Okay, I want to jump in there with a quick question, too, because we're going to lose you. The step aside that you called for Conyers, he has stepped aside from his duties as ranking member of the House Judiciary.
I mean leave.
You mean you want him to quit Congress. And then, again, that would circumvent the voters' vote on this, so that gets a little interesting, too. But before
I think it's like with any company. You've seen Charlie Rose leave. You've seen other people leave because you had cumulative evidence that rang true, good reporting. And I think when the facts sort of all come forward and they're consistent with different cases, it's just time for people to go.
Congresswoman Comstock, I know back in the day you were an intern on Capitol Hill.
Yes.
How does the atmosphere compare today to what you experienced?
Well, you know, that's one of the concerns that I have. We don't know the extent of the problem because we haven't surveyed, you know, all of Congress well enough with the staff and have interns tell us, have staff members, have people in an anonymous way be able to do a survey and tell us what the actual problems are. So that's another aspect of what we want to do to improve the system and really take on the practices that corporate America has been doing this for years. They've been firing CEOs and people when these things happen, but we need to make sure that we have the same rules that everybody else operates under, and that's why we held our hearing several weeks ago, and that's why we're moving swiftly on this.
All right. From the great state of Virginia, Congresswoman Comstock, we appreciate your time and your leadership on this issue with regarding women. We'll be watching the vote tomorrow. As you say, you're putting forth a bill. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
A Fox News alert right now. President Trump meeting with Senate Republicans on Capitol Hill. Also, well, before I move on to that, just to let you know what has happened. So there's that meeting about tax reform. And then the second meeting that he's supposed to have later this afternoon, that's coming up still before us, now looks like it will not have Democrat leadership in it, as Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi, senator and representative respectively, have said they will not be attending. Chuck Schumer spoke on the Senate floor a short time ago talking about why he won't be going. The president said in a tweet, these are the issues that might keep them from making a deal, and so Democrats decided not to show up. Republican leaders will be at the White House to meet with the president. They'll be talking about the spending bill and immigration. And on their agenda, DACA, those dreamers, those children who were born here in the United States, or brought here, I should say, illegally with their families. What will happen with those people, those dreamers? So they'll be talking about it. We're the Democrats. So far, we don't think they'll be at the table. We'll see if that changes. Also, a lawyer for former National Security Advisor Michael Flynn reportedly met with members of Special Counsel Robert Mueller's team yesterday. This following word, Flynn's legal team cut off communications with White House attorneys. Is there a plea deal in the works, and what does it ultimately mean for the investigation? Stay with us.
I think it's something the White House should be very concerned about, because the general was a confidant of Donald Trump going back to the summer of 2015 when he first began his run for the presidency.
Fox News alert. Kentucky Senator Rand Paul is now giving his first interview to Fox News after being physically attacked outside his home and left with 6 broken ribs. Joining us now, Dr. Mark Siegel, Fox News medical correspondent who spoke with the senator. First of all, Dr. Siegel, how's he doing?
Harris, he's doing much better now. He's actually starting to heal, but it's been a long, arduous road. And he told me that he's been hit twice. Once by this attacker running at him down a hill, which nobody knew till now, and the second time by the media, a partisan attack. And we physicians are not used to that. We look at healing as bipartisan or nonpartisan. But I spoke to him about what it was like to be attacked. Take a listen. You were blindsided, I guess.
I was working in my yard with my earmuffs on, you know, to protect my hearing from the mower, and I'd gotten off the mower facing downhill, and the attacker came running full bleed. I never saw him, never had a conversation. In fact, the weird thing is I haven't talked to him in 10 years.
Harris, I spoke to him about what the motive might be, what might be inside the man's head, because you just heard him say he hadn't spoken to his neighbor in almost 10 years. And he thought about it, and he said, you know, I really don't know, but several things come to mind, and they are actually political. Take a look. You don't have any idea what was in his head?
Well, I didn't before the attack because we'd had no conversation. After my ribs were broken, then he said things to me to try to indicate he was unhappy. But I think I guess to me, the bottom line is it isn't so important. If someone mugs you, is it really justified for any reason? And so I think the more people belabored, oh, well, was it about yard clipping? Was it because he hates Donald Trump? Does he hates you because you oppose Obamacare? You don't really know what's in someone's mind. And so it may have some relevance, but for the most part, the real question should be, are you allowed to attack someone from behind in their yard when they're out mowing their grass, even if you dislike something about their yard?
Harris, you know, you and I talk a lot about healing and what it takes to heal, and it might really shock you to know that on his way back to the Senate to weigh in on the tax bill, he developed pneumonia with a temperature of 102.5, and he kept going, and he went back to work. And he also told me he used ibuprofen to treat his pain, not opioids. Harris?
Wow, that's a lot of detail, and people may wonder about the texture of your conversation. I want to point out, this was doctor to doctor, which you had
Absolutely.
an opportunity to ask him some things that maybe other people might not even understand if they ask the questions. So it's interesting about the pain management that you just mentioned, about the total healing. As you look forward, you break 6 ribs. What maybe is something doctor to doctor that you guys talked about that you can share?
Harris, number one, 6 ribs, 3 of them were displaced, and people should know that displaced is a lot worse and a lot more painful, and it puts your lung at risk, and that's why he got the fluid in the lungs. And people also need to know, we talked about the idea that you don't tape lungs. Here's how you get better. You use breathing machines, breathing exercises day after day, and his wife said that at night he struggles to breathe. That's heroic as far as I'm concerned. It's nonpartisan and it's heroic. He's back at work, but he's still got a long road ahead of him, several weeks before he's fully recovered.
Wow.
Harris?
That medical detail from Dr. Mark Siegel on our Fox News team. We appreciate it. Thank you. First interview with Rand Paul since that attack in his yard. Thank you very much. Also tonight you can watch the full interview that Dr. Mark Siegel did on Special Report with Bret Baier. That's 6 p.m. Eastern. Don't miss it. I never do. Michael Flynn's lawyer reportedly met with a member of Special Counsel Robert Mueller's team. ABC News is reporting it happened yesterday morning, raising speculation that the two sides may be negotiating a plea deal for the former national security advisor. This is a source close to the investigation is telling Fox News the president's legal team expects that by the end of next week, Mueller's interviews of White House aides will be complete. Trump's lawyers do not expect the special counsel's office to interview the president. Let's bring in now Robert Driscoll, a former Justice Department official and served as Deputy Assistant Attorney General under President George W. Bush. Great to have you today. Thank you. First of all, your thoughts about potentially a plea deal, the significance of that and what it could look like.
Well, I mean, presuming there is a plea deal, which we don't really know, there's no guarantee it has anything to do with Trump or with Russia collusion. As we saw from the Manafort indictment, special counsel is looking at business transactions and other things that may or may not be related to what I think the public perceives as the Russia investigation. So even if there is a plea deal, I don't think anyone knows whether or not it has much relevance to President Trump.
When we read that the White House anticipates that the interviews will be complete, what does that tell you about this investigation and where we are?
Well, I mean, they would know because obviously everyone's cooperating in the White House, so when the interviews are scheduled. And certainly the completion of interviews by the special counsel's office would signal that they're getting close to the end of the line. There'll be some follow-up they may need to do, and they may need to put some people into a grand jury for certain individuals. But, I mean, I think we're looking towards something maybe early next year if the interviews are indeed finishing up next week or the week after.
You know, there is this sort of tea leaf reading that people like to do. Well, if things are wrapping up quickly over here, maybe it means something. We have no idea. I mean, we did not see what happened with the no-knock door raid on Paul Manafort. We didn't see some of the things coming down the pike.
Yeah, I think that people need to remember that there could be lots of things below the surface of the water, so to speak. I mean, we look at the Manafort indictment, you know, when that came down, you know, the Papadopoulos part of it was kind of unknown to people. There are other parts of this case that were unknown prior to them becoming public. And so although some things have leaked, I think we'd be fairly confident that not everything is leaked. And both the special counsel and others may know things that we just don't know. And so those of us who talk about it try to fill in the gaps as best we can. But I think it's best to be cautious, particularly about this thing with Flynn, with General Flynn, because who knows what is motivating him to cooperate, if indeed he's cooperating. He's obviously got his son involved he wants to protect. There are lots of things that may or may not have to do with President Trump.
All right, Robert Driscoll joining us today talking about the latest on this investigation. We appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you, Harris.
This news is breaking on North Korea, and I'm going to read it to you off my phone in stages right now. Jennifer Griffin, our correspondent on it, says that Pentagon officials say they are checking on reports that North Korea has just fired a ballistic missile. If this is an ICBM like the two launched in July, the Pentagon would make a statement. If it is anything less than that, the comment will come from the U.S. Pacific Command in Hawaii, so we are waiting to see that. Don't want to say that this is happening in a vacuum today, because there are other things that are going on with regard to North Korea as being reported today. According to Reuters, North Korea may announce the completion of its nuclear program within a year. South Korea's unification minister said this earlier today. That isolated nation is moving more fast, or I should say, more quickly than expected in developing its weapons arsenal. Again, that's from the South Korea's unification minister today. That would be a big deal. That would speed up a timeline that we know President Trump and other diplomats in our nation are working on right now. We're watching to see confirmation of this ballistic missile. It matters. North Korea, stay close. Our top story is making news right now because the president is in with Senate GOP leaders. It's their weekly lunch in the Mansfield room, and I know that because one of my guests to the right was telling me that. They do this, but not with the president. This is something special. He's gone to the Hill. He's talking tax reform. They are projected to make a vote on their version of tax reform on Thursday, senators are. There's still some holdouts. We've been talking about it this hour. A couple of no's and 6 wild cards. But other things happening on the Hill today, too, that may inform how Democrats actually act. And that has to do with Democrats not showing up for a meeting with the president today. Back from the outnumbered couch, we have the former chief of staff to Senator Mitch McConnell, Josh Holmes. That's where I was getting my inside scoop. Fox News contributor and syndicated radio talk show host from the left coast is in New York City today. Leslie Marshall is on set. Thank you for being here. I'm going to start with you, Leslie, because during Outnumbered, we wondered, how is it possible that you can make your voice known as leadership, not just for the Democrats in the Senate and the House, but all those people who voted for you if you don't take a meeting with the president?
I agree with you. And you guys know I'm a Democrat, but I'm a realist. And if you want something, and you want something from the deal maker, you got to meet with the guy. Now, here's the problem that I have. I feel both sides are acting childish or acting juvenile. The president with his tweets, "I don't deal with Dems." Well, he has before. And if you want to get things done for the best interest of all people, some Democrats, some Republicans, some other, you got to meet with Democrats. But in the same regard, Schumer and Pelosi should have met with him, because to me, it's just doubling down on the level of childishness not to go in and meet with him and at least present your case, because they have in the past. They have actually flipped the president.
Well, he has met
favor.
with them, and they got what they wanted.
Yes,
at
do
least
it again.
Kicking it down the can a little bit, protecting the DACA program as it is. It will go away anyway if they don't do something about it, to a time when they could talk about it.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if I'm the only one that remembers the last time they went down to the White House, they offered the president a deal and he took it.
Yes.
It's like, holy smokes, wait.
And how good would it look for them and look for Dems?
So I agree. There is absolutely no reason for them to not go down there. You're dealing with must-pass items. These are government funding items. They have priorities like DACA and others. But it's not an optional thing. You have to actually get this stuff done. That's what governing is. That's why they're there in the first place. And so the idea that they can just kind of say no thanks and not show up is completely ridiculous.
So Chris Stirewalt likened this to the latest show on Broadway, where it's all for show. That the problem is you're going into a season when people don't want angst about their government shutting down and about their paychecks. And we do have a lot of people who work for the government and cottage industries that depend on the government and those workers being employed. So, we hear the talk about, well, it'll come close. It'll come close, but it won't happen. Will it?
Unfortunately, in recent years, it has.